Came on a Tuesday, which I remember because I had just microwaved the same cup of coffee for the third time that morning and finally given up on it. My son's school, Ridgewood Elementary, a place I'd written a lot of tuition checks to over the past 4 years, appeared on my phone screen. I set down the cold cup and answered. "Mrs. Harlow, this is the front office at Ridgewood. We need you to come in. There's been a situation involving Owen." Situation. That word did a lot of heavy lifting for a lot of different things. I asked what kind of situation. A physical altercation. He's been suspended pending a parent meeting. I grabbed my keys without bothering to change out of my work clothes. I was 3 months into a new role as operations director at a logistics firm in Portland, Oregon. A job I had fought hard to get and harder to keep since my husband traveled for work roughly 2 weeks out of every 4, which meant most days I was the one fielding the school calls, the sick days, the everything. Owen was 9. He was the kind of kid who didn't apologize easily and made eye contact in a way that unnerved adults. His teachers called him strong-willed. I had always called it something quieter and harder to name, a distance between us that had existed since he was small, something I couldn't push through, no matter how many bedtime routines we kept or vacations we took. My husband, Derek, said I was too hard on him. Derek always said that. When I walked into Principal Hartley's office, Owen was sitting with his arms crossed, a split lip and an expression of complete indifference. He looked at me the way people look at a stranger who sits too close on public transit. He was in a fight with a girl named Phoebe, 12 years old, a 6th grader from the after-school arts program the school shared with a nearby community center. According to witnesses, Owen and 2 of his friends had been throwing away another girl's lunch. Phoebe intervened. Words escalated. Owen shoved the younger girl. Phoebe hit him first. I stared at my son. "You were targeting a little girl's lunch." He shrugged. "She's annoying. She always tattles." "Owen, she started it. You pushed a 7-year-old. He had nothing to say to that. He didn't look ashamed. He looked bored. Principal Hartley told me this wasn't isolated. There had been other complaints, smaller incidents that hadn't been formally reported because the kids were afraid to. I signed the suspension paperwork. I thanked her. I walked Owen to the car in silence. On the drive home, he spoke first. "Dad wouldn't have made it into such a big deal. Your father isn't here. He would have understood." I kept my eyes on the road. Understanding isn't the same as condoning it. He looked out the window. I thought about what Principal Hartley had told me about Phoebe, 12, from the community center, apparently fiercely protective of the younger kids. She'd been checked out by the center's supervisor and was fine. Just a few scrapes. I'd asked if Phoebe was okay before I asked anything else. I noticed that Owen hadn't asked at all. I took him to urgent care because his lip needed to be looked at and because, whatever I thought of his behavior, he was still my responsibility. While a nurse cleaned up the cut and asked him how the other guy looked, I stepped into the hallway and checked my phone. A text from Derek. "Got your message about school. We'll sort it out when I'm back." He's a kid, Nora. Don't go nuclear. I stared at that for a long moment. Don't go nuclear. I had called him to tell him his son had been suspended for bullying a child, and his response was to manage my reaction rather than address his son's. I put the phone in my pocket. The urgent care clinic was small, one of those strip mall ones between a nail salon and a sandwich shop. While Owen was with the nurse, I sat in the waiting area next to a woman reading a magazine who eventually looked up and said, "Nora? Nora Calloway?" I hadn't heard that name in 6 years. Calloway was my maiden name. I looked at the woman and after a second recognized her. Grey at the temples now, reading glasses, but the same kind eyes. Dr. Fielding. She'd been my OB. She delivered Owen. She smiled the way old acquaintances do. Warm, slightly uncertain. "I thought that was you. How are you? How's the little one?" "He's 9 now," I said. "He's in with the nurse." "Oh, nothing serious, I hope." She glanced toward the back. "And your daughter? She must be, 10, 11 by now?" The waiting room went very quiet. Or maybe it was just the inside of my head. "I'm sorry, Dr. Dury." Fielding tilted her head. "Your daughter, from the delivery." "I have a son," I said. The words came out mechanically. "Owen, I have one child." Something shifted in her face. The warmth didn't leave, but something underneath it went still and careful. "Nora, you delivered twins?" The magazine woman had stopped pretending to read. "No." My voice was steady. I had trained it to be steady for board meetings, for hard conversations, for Derek when he made things that were serious sound small. "No, I didn't. I had one child. Owen. He was premature. NICU for 2 weeks." Dr. Fielding set her magazine down completely. She leaned slightly forward and her voice dropped. "Nora, I delivered 2 babies that night. A boy and a girl. The girl was smaller, maybe 5 pounds, but she was breathing on her own within minutes. I remember because we were so relieved." She paused. "Your husband was with the babies while you were in recovery. I assumed. I left for a conference in Boston the next morning. I assumed everything had been explained to you." I heard myself say, "Derek was with the babies." "Yes. He was there when I left the unit. I remember he said you both agreed the children would go to different—" She stopped. "Nora, what did he tell you?" I thought about what Derek had told me. That there had been one baby, a boy, premature. That I had been heavily sedated during delivery, and by the time I was lucid enough to hold him, it had been 2 days. I remembered asking in the fog of recovery whether everything was okay. He had said yes. He had cried. He had held my hand. "He told me there was one," I said. "A boy." "Dr. State." Fielding's face did something I did not want to look at directly. "I need to make sure I'm remembering correctly," she said carefully. "But Nora, I signed those birth reports myself. There were 2. Owen came out of the back with a bandaged lip and an impatient look. I told Dr. Fielding I needed to go. She touched my arm before I turned. "Call the hospital records department," she said quietly. "Providence Memorial. Ask for the delivery notes from the night of. You know the date. Don't take anyone else's word for it." I drove home with Owen in the back seat. He played a game on his phone. I replayed the last 9 years, Derek's business trips, the ones that had started about a year after Owen was born, supposedly for an engineering consultancy he joined. Every few weeks, always the same general region, Sacramento, he said. Bay Area, Northern California. The way he'd managed everything during my delivery recovery, the paperwork, the insurance. He'd been so organized about it, so on top of everything, which had seemed at the time like the kindest possible version of him. I had always wondered why I couldn't feel closer to Owen. I had loved him the way you love something you've made yourself responsible for, with effort, with duty, with the occasional flash of something warmer that I clung to. But the bond I'd read about, the one that was supposed to feel like recognition, had never arrived. I had blamed myself for 9 years. That night, after Owen was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up the Providence Memorial patient portal. My records were there, archived from the account I'd set up during the pregnancy. I requested the full delivery record. It came through in the morning. I read it twice. The delivery notes listed 2 infants. Baby A, male, 5 pounds 9 hours, NICU transfer. Baby B, female, 4 pounds 14 hours, NICU transfer. Baby B, female, 4 pounds 14 hours, NICU transfer. Both born via emergency C-section following preeclampsia complications. Attending physician, Dr. Fielding. The discharge summary, however, listed 1 infant. Male. Released to parents. Baby B's NICU records stopped on the 3rd day. There was a transfer notation. The destination field had been filled in and then redacted, blacked out on the scan in a way that looked deliberate. Below the redaction, a handwritten addendum. Released to father per parental agreement. Released to father per parental agreement. Not to parents. Not to us. To father. Derek had taken my daughter somewhere and he had never told me she existed. I did not panic. I am not built for panic. I am built for the particular kind of cold, quiet rage that gets things done. I closed the laptop. I made coffee. I let it get cold. Then I started making calls. The first was to a family law attorney, Pat Acartha, whose cards I'd kept for years in a folder of things I never wanted to need. I didn't explain everything on the phone. I just said I had documentation questions. She said, "Come in Thursday." The second call was harder. I called my sister Diane, who lived in Bend, and who had always been somewhat suspicious of Derek in the specific way that sisters are suspicious of the men their sisters choose. Not dramatically, just quietly and consistently. I told her what I knew so far. There was a long silence. "How long has he been going to Sacramento?" she asked. 9 years. Another silence. Then, "Do you want me to come?" "Not yet," I said. "Soon." I didn't call Derek. I needed to understand the full picture before I let him know I'd started looking. He'd been managing information for nearly a decade. I had maybe a 2-day window before he figured out something had shifted, and I was not going to waste it. A contact from my professional network, a former colleague whose brother ran a private investigations firm, connected me within 48 hours to a woman named Sandra Rowe who specialized in exactly the kind of work I needed. She was professional, expensive, and very calm about things that should not have been calm. I told her everything. She told me what she needed. I gave it to her. 3 days later, she sent me a preliminary report. Sacramento address, consistent with Derek's travel records, a house in the Midtown neighborhood, rented under Derek's name since Owen was 13 months old. Occupant, a woman named Bridget Lau, 34, employed as a pediatric occupational therapist. No criminal record, no public social media, child in residence, one female, age 9, name listed on school enrollment as Hadley Lau Harlow. Harlow, my last name. He had given my daughter my last name while hiding her from me. Attached to the report a school photo, standard issue blue background, gap-toothed smile, the kind they take in October that parents buy in bulk and send to grandparents. She had my mother's nose, my grandmother's hands in miniature. I could see even in a school photo that particular way the fingers lay. And she was looking directly at the camera with an expression of complete and utter self-possession. I sat with that photo for a long time. Sandra's follow-up report confirmed that Derek had been present at Bridget's address regularly for years, always within the window of his supposed business travel. Owen had been brought there at least 3 times in the past year. In the photos from Sandra's surveillance taken in public spaces, a park, a farmer's market, Owen walked beside Bridget with the comfortable ease of someone who had been doing it for years. He knew. My 9-year-old had known about his sister and his father's other life, and he had come home every time and said nothing. I thought about that for exactly 1 evening. Then I filed it away. He was a child. He had been put in that position by adults. That was not his fault. The rest of his behavior we would get to. I met with Pater Koffel on Thursday. I brought the delivery records, Sandra's report, and Derek's bank statements from the past 4 years, which I had access to because we had a joint account and I had simply never looked at the columns I was now looking at. The Sacramento rental. The monthly transfers to an account I hadn't recognized. The school tuition payments. Hadley was enrolled in a private elementary school in Sacramento. Pat looked at everything for a long time. Then she said, "Your husband has been financially supporting a second household, including a child he is the legal father of, while concealing from you the existence of that child and your legal relationship to her as her biological mother. That's a significant legal situation." "I know," I said. "Do you know how you want to proceed?" I had thought about it for 72 hours. "I want full documentation of everything. I want to consult on my parental rights regarding my daughter. And I want to understand exactly what leverage I have before Derek comes home on Sunday." She nodded. "Let's get started." Derek came home Sunday evening. He came through the door the way he always did, bag over one shoulder, already loosening his tie, calling out to Owen. Owen came downstairs and they did their usual thing, a handshake that turned into a half hug, some joke about a game score. I watched from the kitchen doorway. Then Derek looked at me and something in my face must have registered, because his own face did something small and involuntary, a flicker, there and gone. "Hey," he said. "Owen," I said. "Go to your room, please. Your father and I need to talk." Owen looked between us with that unnerving 9-year-old's radar and went upstairs without arguing, which told me he already knew something was wrong. Derek set his bag down. "What's going on?" "Sit down." He sat. He had the particular posture of someone who's deciding which story to tell. "I ran into Dr. Fielding," I said, "at urgent care, when I took Owen in after his suspension." He said nothing. The posture changed slightly. She asked about our daughter. Very quietly, Nora, don't. I set the folder on the table between us, the delivery records, Sandra Rose investigation, your bank statements, the Sacramento rental in your name, Hadley's school records. I sat down across from him. I have all of it. What I need from you right now is the truth, the actual, complete truth. Because the version where I find out more from a private investigator than I do from my own husband ends very badly for you. He stared at the folder. His jaw was tight. The man I had watched cry in a hospital room 9 years ago, holding my hand and telling me our premature son was okay, was sitting across from me doing the math on how much I already knew. He told me, when I went into emergency delivery, I had been under general anesthesia faster than expected. He had been in the waiting area when Dr. Fielding came out to tell him there were two, a boy and a girl, both early, both in the NICU, both expected to be okay. He had called Bridget before he called anyone else. They had talked for 40 minutes. Bridget had been in his life for almost 2 years at that point. They had started talking about leaving his marriage. They had been afraid of what a baby, a complicated delivery, and a suddenly vulnerable wife would do to those plans. And then there were 2 babies, T-babies, and one of them was a girl, small and already fighting, and Bridget said she would raise her. She had always wanted a daughter. Derek agreed. He arranged the transfer paperwork through the hospital, citing a private parental agreement, vague enough that an overworked resident had processed it without flagging it to anyone senior. Dr. Fielding had already left for Boston. The nurse who had been on shift was a traveling nurse. No one followed up. He told Owen when Owen was severed in pieces over months as part of explaining why they sometimes visited a friend in Sacramento. You told our 9-year-old and not me, I said. He kept asking questions. He's a child. He shouldn't have been carrying that. Derek looked at the table. I know. What else do you know? Do you know where my daughter has been for 9 years? Do you know that she's in a private school you've been paying for, with joint account money, by the way, while I sat in this house thinking I had one child? Do you know what it is to raise someone else's child as your own while your actual child grows up calling another woman mum? He didn't answer. I want to ask you something, I said. My voice was quiet. The quiet that comes after you've burned through every other register. Was there a part of you, any part that thought this was going to be okay, that at some point this would just resolve itself? He rubbed his face. I told myself you were better off, that you couldn't handle. Do not finish that sentence. He didn't. I told him what was going to happen. He was going to sign a separation agreement that evening, drafted by Pat, waiving his claims on the house and the primary financial accounts. He was going to provide a full written statement of what happened at Providence Memorial, every detail, signed. He was going to contact Bridget and tell her I would be reaching out, and he was going to understand that every element of what he had done, the concealment, the falsified paperwork, the decade of financial misdirection, was documented and would be submitted to the appropriate authorities if he did anything other than cooperate fully. He asked about Owen. Owen is your son. Biologically. I stood up. He is also a child who has been taught to lie to his mother for 2 years. That is something we will address separately. But you don't get to use him as a bargaining chip. He is not your leverage. He is a child you put in an impossible position. Derek signed the papers that night. He stayed in a hotel. Owen heard none of it. In the morning, I sat down with Owen before school. I didn't give him the whole story. I told him that his dad and I were going to be living separately for a while, that it was adult stuff, that none of it was his fault. He sat across from me with his cereal and that careful measuring look he always had. Then he said, "Does this mean I can't see Hadley anymore?" I hadn't been prepared for that. I kept my face still. "Do you know who Hadley is?" I asked. "She's my sister," he said. Like it was simple, like it was obvious, like it had always been true, which it had. How long have you known? Dad's told me when I was in 2nd grade. He said it was a secret. He said you'd be upset. He looked at his cereal. I thought you knew and just didn't want to talk about it. 9 years old, and he had been holding that. No wonder he kept his distance from me. No wonder he had that wall up, that constant judgment in his eyes. He had thought I was the one who chose not to acknowledge his sister. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Under the bravado and the suspension and the split lip, there was a kid who had been handed a secret too big for him and told to smile at the dinner table. "You're not in trouble," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." His expression flickered. He hadn't expected that. "But I need you to help me now," I said, "because things are going to change, and some of the changes are going to be hard, and I need to know you're with me." He thought about it. He was 9, so he thought about it in the concrete way 9-year-olds do, staring at his spoon. "Is Hadley going to come here?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "That's one of the things we have to figure out." He nodded slowly. "Okay." And then, as if it was obvious, "She'd probably like your garden. She likes plants." I drove to Sacramento that weekend. Bridget Lau lived in a craftsman bungalow with a porch full of potted herbs and a wind chime made of sea glass. It was the kind of house a person makes intentional choices about. I sat in the rental car across the street for 10 minutes before I got out. She opened the door before I could knock. She had been watching me pull up. She looked calm in the way that people who have been expecting a reckoning for 9 years look calm. "You're Nora," she said. "Yes." She stepped back and let me in. The house was clean and warm, bookshelves everywhere, a cat on the couch, children's drawings on the refrigerator, detailed, almost architectural in their precision, labelled in careful handwriting. "Hadley," the label said. "She's at a friend's," Bridget said. I thought for this conversation it was better. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. It was a civilized conversation, which is another way of saying it was one of the most difficult things I have ever done while remaining still. She told me her version. She and Derek had met at a work conference. She had known he was married and she had made choices she was not proud of. When she found out about the twins, she had told herself she was doing the kind thing, that a premature surprise daughter was more than Nora could handle on top of everything else. She'd told herself this for 9 years. She had also, I noticed, never once sought to find out if Nora was handling it fine. "I kept her," Bridget said, and something in her voice broke slightly. She's extraordinary. She fixes things. Everything in this house. If something breaks, she figures it out. She's 9 years old and she rewired a lamp last month." Her voice caught. "I love her. I want you to know that. She didn't go without." "She went without me," I said. Not unkindly, just factually. Bridget looked to the table. "I'm not here to take her," I said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not going to uproot her life to make a point." I leaned forward slightly, "But she is my daughter, and she has a right to know who I am on her timeline in a way that doesn't terrify her, and I'm going to be part of her life. That is not negotiable." "What does that look like?" Bridget asked. "I don't know yet. That's something we figure out together with her therapist involved and with Hadley's input as she's able to give it. But it starts with honesty. No more secrets, no more managing what she knows." Bridget nodded. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. "She's been asking questions about her dad's wife, about Owen." She hesitated. "She knows something is happening." "She's perceptive," I said. "She gets it from." Bridget stopped. "From her mother," I finished. A pause. Then Bridget said, "Yes. Hadley came home 40 minutes later, which I think was not accidental. She walked through the front door with a backpack half unzipped and dirt on her knees, and she stopped when she saw me sitting at her kitchen table. She looked at me for a long time. I looked back. She had my mother's nose. Up close it was even clearer. "Are you her?" she asked. I didn't insult her by asking what she meant. "Yes." She set her backpack down with great deliberateness, the way children do when they are buying themselves time to think. Then she walked over and sat down at the table across from me, exactly the way Bridget had. "Owen talks about you," she said. "He says you're strict." "I am," I said. "He's right." She considered this. "He also said you're the one who shows up. He said when there's a problem at school, you come, not his dad." I hadn't known Owen had said that. I didn't know how to absorb it in front of her. "I try," I said. She looked at the refrigerator where her drawings were, then back at me. "Mom said you didn't know I existed. Is that true?" "Yes. I found out 2 weeks ago." "Are you angry?" "Yes," I said, "but not at you." She nodded, absorbing this. She had the same self-possession I'd seen in the school photo. Something that was her own, not Derek's, not mine, just hers, forged from 9 years of being Hadley. "I don't know what to call you," she said. "You don't have to call me anything yet," I said. "You don't have to decide anything today." She picked at a thread on her sleeve. "Owen calls you Mum." "He does. But you didn't know about me." She frowned slightly. "So does that mean you chose him?" It was the question I hadn't prepared for, the one that mattered. "No," I said carefully. "Someone made a choice for both of us without asking either of us. You didn't get chosen or not chosen. You got hidden. And that is the thing I am the most sorry about." Hadley sat with that. "Can I show you something?" she said finally. She took me to the garage, which she had clearly claimed as a workspace, a pegboard of tools organized by size, a project on the work table that appeared to be an old transistor radio in various states of disassembly. She walked me through what she was doing with the same matter-of-fact fluency that I used to use when I was 13, and explaining to my father why a business plan he'd made didn't account for overhead. She didn't ask me to be impressed. She just showed me. "This is how you spend your Saturdays," I asked. "And some days," she said. "Mom thinks I should have more hobbies. I think this is enough." "I agree with you," I said. She looked at me sidelong. "Owen said you'd say that." My daughter apparently had a more complete picture of me than I had ever had of her. When I left, she walked me to the door. She didn't hug me. She stuck out her hand, very formal, and I shook it. "I'll see you again," she said. It was a question. "Yes," I said. "Whenever you want." She nodded. "Okay." And then, "Bridget said you were in operations, like logistics and systems." "Yes." "I want to learn about supply chains," she said, "for a project." It was such a 9-year-old way to open a door, so completely, specifically hers. "Call me," I said. "We'll figure it out." The legal process took the better part of a year. Derek, faced with the documentation, cooperated. The hospital launched an internal review of the delivery records, which went nowhere satisfying but established a formal acknowledgement that an irregularity had occurred. Dr. Kerr. Fielding provided a full statement. A corrected birth record was issued. I was formally recognized as Hadley's biological mother. The custody arrangement was unconventional by most standards. Hadley stayed primarily with Bridget in Sacramento, at her own request and her therapist's recommendation. Her life was there, her school, her garage, her friends. I flew down twice a month. We video called on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Owen came with me twice, and it was exactly as awkward and occasionally funny as I expected, because Owen was Owen and Hadley was Hadley, and they had approximately 40% of their DNA in common and almost nothing else, but they were working on it. On a Tuesday in March, almost exactly a year after the call from Ridgewood Elementary, almost exactly a year after I had given up on a cup of coffee, I flew into Sacramento in the afternoon. Hadley's school had a project fair and she had invited me. Her project was on electrical circuit efficiency. She built a working model. She won first place in the 6th grade division, which was unusual for a 4th grader, and she accepted the ribbon with complete composure and immediately handed it to me to hold while she shook the judge's hand. Afterward, in Bridget's kitchen, the 4 of us, me, Bridget, Hadley, and Owen, over video call on my phone, propped against the fruit bowl, ate the celebratory cake Bridget had made. Hadley sat across from me and told Owen in exhaustive detail why his understanding of circuits was insufficient. "You're so annoying," Owen said, which, from Owen, was practically affectionate. "You're welcome," Hadley said. I watched her. The way she'd held herself all day, assured and self-contained, but occasionally glancing to find me in the room, checking that I was still there. I was still there. After Owen signed off and Bridget moved around the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone clearing space, Hadley pushed a piece of cake across the table to me, the larger piece. "You didn't eat enough," she said. "Not you should eat more. Just a fact, a noted deficiency corrected." I took a plate. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was that there was a person-shaped hole in my chest that had been there for 9 years, and that she fit it exactly, not because she was small or needed me. She didn't particularly need anyone. She was magnificently her own self, but because she was mine and she was here and she had just pushed me the bigger piece of cake. "Thanks," I said. She shrugged. "It's just cake." She went to bed 20 minutes later after making me promise to send her 2 links about supply chain software that she had written down on a sticky note. I put the sticky note in my pocket. Bridget and I sat at the table in the quiet. She looked for you in the crowd today, Bridget said. Before she saw you, she was looking. I knew. I had seen it. She's going to be something, I said. Bridget smiled tiredly. She already is. She was right. Hadley was already something. She had built herself out of the only materials available, in a garage in Sacramento without me, and she had done it so well that I was still catching up to who she was. I had been looking for a bond that felt like recognition. I just hadn't expected to find it in a girl who fixed lamps and won circuit competitions and handed me the bigger piece of cake. But there it was. Unmistakably, there she was. There's a thing that happens when you've been lied to for a long time. You start to believe the confusion is yours. You think the distance you feel, the quiet wrongness you can't name, is some failure in yourself. I spent 9 years thinking I wasn't capable of the bond I was supposed to feel. I read articles about it. I blame my personality, my work schedule, the way I was raised. I gave the lie so much room that it started to shape how I saw myself. That's the part that stays with me now, more than Derek's choices or the legal process or any of it. The cost of a sustained deception isn't just the thing that was hidden. It's everything the person on the other side builds in its place to explain the gap. I built 9 years of self-doubt out of a lie someone else chose to maintain. What I've come to understand, slowly and not always gracefully, is that actions compound, not in any mystical sense, just in the plain structural way that choices accumulate into consequences. Derek didn't make one decision. He made thousands of small ones. Every trip to Sacramento, every form he signed, every time Owen asked a question and he answered with a managed version of the truth. Each one felt containable in the moment, I'm sure. Each one made the next one easier. That's how people end up somewhere they never could have arrived at in a single step. And here's the thing about that kind of accumulation, it doesn't just affect the person doing it. Owen carried Derek's secret for 2 years at 7 years old, and it made him hard to reach. It made him build walls. I kept mistaking for his character. When I think about what I want for him now, the thing I come back to is this. I want him to understand that integrity isn't a dramatic gesture. It's the small choice you make when no one is watching, and it would be easier to say nothing. That's the actual work of being a decent person, not the big moments. The small ones. Hadley figured that out on her own in a Sacramento garage, with no one teaching her explicitly. She built things and fixed things and learned things because the doing of it mattered to her, not the recognition. When I shook her hand at the door that first day, I thought about how much of herself she had developed without any input from me, and how little that diminished what I felt standing there. She was already fully herself. What I was being offered wasn't a child to shape, it was a person to know. I think that's what this past year has taught me about resilience. It's not about being unaffected, it's about staying curious. Hadley was curious about circuits and supply chains. Owen is, slowly, becoming curious about who he wants to be now that the version of events he was handed has collapsed. I'm curious about both of them in a way I wasn't capable of before, because I finally have the full picture. You can't really know what you're working with when half the information has been withheld. That's true in operations, and it turns out it's true in family too. When you finally have the truth, even a hard one, you can actually start. That's where I am. That's where we are. Starting with the whole picture, and the bigger piece of cake pushed across the table by a 9-year-old who noticed I hadn't eaten enough. That's enough. That is genuinely completely enough.